The Southern African Development Community, SADC, is a regional economic community comprising of 16 member states. The main objectives of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, are to achieve economic development, peace, security, and growth, alleviate poverty, enhance the standard and quality of life of the people of the Southern African, and support the socially disadvantaged through the regional integration. CATS International, Lusaka, set out on a mission to uncover the challenges and opportunities in the pursuit of realizing the authentic essence of SADC regional integration in both Zambia and the region at large.
Infrastructure challenges that constrain the growth of mining in Zambia are the limited rail infrastructure, because this means that our cost to port is higher than in other parts of the world, because we do so by road, which is more costly, and it also translates overall into a less reliable time frame for reaching the port. So that's the first constraint.
Many challenges cross-border traders are facing in all parts of Africa, and I think within the SADC region, the challenges comes from the movement of goods and services that are not properly facilitated by governments. Because I'll give you the history of what they used to call cross-border traders. Most cross-border traders were referred to as smugglers, and some of them are being referred to as prostitutes, especially women. In that particular time, that if you see a woman get involved in cross-border trade, they used to say these were actually even trading, bringing diseases within the region, which was actually misplaced, thinking for so many people. They never thought that the activities that people were carrying out were a survival strategy to provide themselves with employment and income, and probably as a strategy for job creation and poverty alleviation.
Transportation is a challenge, security, the taxes that we pay at the borders, as well as harassment, sometimes sexual harassment. There's always sometimes communication barrier in terms of when you go to a foreign country like a Portuguese-speaking country like Mozambique, or even just Congo here by Kasumbalesa. So women are harassed, we are harassed. There's also custom regulations, like I said, standard of trade. You find that importing our goods, or sometimes when we export our goods, they are not recognized.
One thing that we must realize about SADC, I'll give an example of Zambia. Zambia only has about 1.3% of young people represented in our legislative body, which is called Parliament. And that is against the backdrop of having over 70% of people who are aged below 35. So that is a disparity in itself. And a barrier to that effect is lack of representation. When we are underrepresented in the different government and legislative bodies of our different states as a SADC region, you'll find that a lot of young people are unable to participate. And just like women and girls, young people also face issues of income, right? Young people are unable to participate in the governance processes, and henceforth they are hindered in that regard.
Amidst all these challenges, a couple of opportunities exist to achieve regional integration.
Peace and security are crucial for regional development, for regional integration and accelerated participation of citizens of SADC in the region's development, because without peace it is not possible to have smooth implementation of any development policies. I think peace is the foundation on which any development activities, any regional integration can take place. Where there is strife, people cannot talk to each other, they cannot work together, they cannot move together. So where there is peace, then it creates that environment where people trust each other, they are able to freely engage each other, they are able to work together in terms of developing the region.
The perceptions around women impede women's participation. What is important to ensure that women, participate effectively in ensuring that SADC achieves its objectives and around the Agenda 2050 is that there needs to be a recognition that first and foremost, women form, in most cases, slightly over 50% of the population. And 50% of the population is very, very important if we want to garner effective and inclusive participation.
Rail is a very, very heavy investment industry. However, you have discoveries of natural gas offshore within the region, and there's no reason why we cannot develop an integrated, compressed natural gas rail system that runs from coast to coast through the nexus of Zambia. Zambia is central, so if you have such a plan, all these places, all these rail lines would need to meet within Zambia and head up north into the DRC to the mining provinces. So if we were to cooperate on building such a compressed natural gas financed rail line, then we would definitely lower the cost of transport, time to port, and we would also lower the cost of inputs, delivering inputs into the mining sector as well. So that's a cooperative action which would lower the cost of doing business here for miners and therefore increase the rate of return and the attractiveness of us as a destination for mining capital.
There are aspects for intra-African trade which have been for a long time very negated. Traditionally, we've just been thinking that the Western markets or the Asian markets, the Eastern markets as it were, are more lucrative for us because the terms and conditions for us to be engaging in trade are much easier externally than internally. So we've got a cultural challenge that we need to begin to deal with. But when we want to look at, and one thing that is important that each one of us must begin to realize is contrary to perceptions that are given that Africa lacks. Africa does not lack, Africa has.
What we are just trying to say is that we really need to have a lot of much more leverage to input into what comes as resolutions at the National Development Coordinating Committee level under the economic cluster where the SADC National Committee sits. So what we are also trying to say is that the mechanism of engagement must be an engagement that should allow the participation of all non-state actors, including the academia, including the trade unions, and including private sector, into making sure that we are going to have a representative voice when we are talking about the implementation of the Regional Indicative Strategy Development Plan.
Yeah, obviously we've talked about the fact that production will be growing, which is an above the line, a turnover-based benefit. But on the input side, if we localize as much as possible of the mining value chain, that is the inputs, the manufacture of those goods locally, then we will be at a significant advantage again in cost, because a lot of the raw materials that are required are here. We now have a steel industry present, and we have a situation where in South Africa there are a lot of original equipment manufacturers looking to set up shop in key mining markets across the continent, Zambia being one of them. If you were to establish this lowering of cost through what are called, altogether you call them mining, engineering and technical services here, this has no reason not to become a mining, engineering and technical services hub, and for these services to then be re-exported to our neighboring mining countries that are also in development.
Well, the fundamental issue is harness, right? Harnessing comes from the ability of any entity to have potential. So an understanding is that the young people of Africa and SADC are the enlightened and dynamic force upon whom the future and destiny of our region and the continent lies. And henceforth, one of the major things that is needed for the harnessing of this potential is the implementation of an increased educational, platform for them to learn. So we need a lot of access to education for young people in the SADC region and the African continent, for them to be knowledgeable about the systems of the world.